What's going on, everyone? Tanner Poppet here of Madrost and Poppet's Corner. Just reminding you that our new record, Charring the Rotting Earth, is now available at NoLifeTomatoRecords.com. That's right. Just go in the search bar, type in NoLifeTomatoRecords.com, and support. Again, NoLifeTomatoRecords.com. Now, let's check out the episode you came to see. What's going on, everyone? Welcome, episode 106 of Poppet's Corner. And I'm really thoroughly excited about doing this specific interview because I'm a huge fan of the specific gentleman and the specific band that he is in. And of course, I'm talking about the great Andre Hartoonian of the mighty Hexen. Andre, how you doing, man? Thanks so much for coming on the show and hanging.
Dude, my pleasure. I've been watching this show forever, been waiting forever to get on, man. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, man. Like I said, I've been a fan for a number of years now, and it's I always get requests for bands, and Hexen was one of my early requests. So that is the reason why I had to get Mr. Carlos Cruz on, just because he was the only one that I knew of this specific project. So,
Awesome episode.
Thank you, buddy. And we're gonna do it again, obviously, with you. And if you're ready, I'd love to get started and just pick your brain for an hour or two.
Hell yeah, let's roll.
Cool. So how I like to start off these is just get to know you on like a musical level, and I'm kind of curious for you. When was your first recollection of just kind of hearing music for the first time, and what did it do for you in a mental capacity?
Oh, man. I guess we'll really be going back. It's funny. When I was a kid, I would before I even knew what mixtapes were or whatever, I had this little boombox, and I was so in love with some of the video game music in the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES that I was playing. The first Nintendo, the back in the day, '85 Mario and all that. That I would put the boombox up to the TV at that certain level of the certain intro music or whatever, and I had a mixtape of video game music, so I could listen to that in the car, in the mornings going to school or whatever. So that was when I was 4 or 5. Before that, I think the first music that I ever got into, aside from whatever my dad would be listening to, and all his 70s tapes or whatever, aside from whatever was on at home, which could vary from ethnic music to Pink Floyd or what have you. I liked movie soundtracks a lot. Okay. I think the first CD I ever bought was the Terminator 2 soundtrack, and then the second CD I ever bought, with my own money, as 5-year-old kid, with chores, allowance money, or whatever the fuck. Was the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, which had a lot of metal in there, like Fear Factory and all of the 1995 Mortal Kombat, and the Rock soundtrack. I remember I would listen to those all day, every day, without even knowing what metal was. I remember the Napalm Death song and the Mortal Kombat soundtrack would get me going. And I'm like a 5-year-old kid just listening to fucking Twist the Knife by Napalm Death, thrashing in my fucking room, moshing in my living room and shit, before I even knew what metal was. So that's kind of my beginnings with music there. So, incidentally finding shit that I'm into, video game music here or movie soundtracks or whatever my parents were listening to. Whatever was popular at the time, Gangsta's Paradise,
So
rap,
let me ask you something real quick. I want to go back to the movie soundtracks in general and kind of just, what did the those soundtracks specifically do for you? Did you gravitate more towards the layers of the music itself, or did you kind of just like the movie and the soundtrack kind of just made the movie for you, so you kind of locked in just with having the visual aspect as opposed to say just the audio?
I guess I can answer your question this way. It made me like think of something, like realize something that I haven't like thought of and realized in a while, which is I used to get goosebumps whenever I'd hear anything that would make the hair in the back of my neck stand up. You know what I mean? Like whatever it was. And I haven't felt that in a while. I don't know if we're getting old or what, but that's how I knew. So if whether it was watching a movie and you know, the Terminator soundtrack at the end of the movie, the whole finale and everything happening together, the music being such a huge part of it, obviously, and that would just give me goosebumps. And I'm like, all right, I need that. I need to get my hands on that music wherever I can find it. You know, I had no idea back then, so I'd look around. If I someplace, you know, it would be sold out a lot of times, like in Blockbuster Music or the Warehouse or Sam Goodyear or whatever. And I'd have to like look into magazines and try to order it with like money order or whatever back then. But I think that was my barometer. If it would give me goosebumps, I was into it. Whether that was a movie soundtrack, after I saw the movie, I had to get my hands on that soundtrack or whatever, or you know, whatever I heard and liked. And it's weird. It hasn't happened in a while, I guess. I mean, I've heard stuff that really like gets me into it, but to really like give me goosebumps, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like, so from, I can probably add somewhat to this is, you know, did it feel like you kind of listened to music for like the first time? Because it's only happened to me like 2 or 3 times. So like I would find like there would be like, I only can literally do like 2 specific. When I heard Ted Nugent for the first time, it felt like I was hearing music for the first time. And I'm like, what is this?
Right. That feeling. Right.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So it's interesting that movie soundtracks kind of did that for you instead of just like rock, and obviously this was the kind of the gateway to you discovering a heavier style of music. But it seems like movies were in a very important aspect of your specific childhood, whether it be, I don't know,
I am a movie buff. Yeah.
Okay. Whether it be you going to the movies or renting it from, you said Blockbuster. So, you know, me and you are probably the last generation to probably remember what Blockbuster even was. Sadly. So, but it's just interesting that, you know, with movies came out, you know, music kind of came out of the movies for you specifically. So very interesting, actually.
I mean, the rock soundtrack, like I mentioned, had some of the earliest and best work of what's that dude's name? Hans Zimmerman, and that guy's music is all over Hollywood nowadays. You know, it's in a couple of those Nolan Batman movies where it just sounds big and, you know, huge orchestra and all that. And in The Rock, the movie, I mean, just the finale with the music and everything. Did you ever see that movie with Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage and Ed Harris?
I have not. Not the.
You haven't seen that movie? Okay. Have you seen Terminator 2?
Of course.
Okay. So at the end of Terminator 2, when he's lowering himself into the lava and he gives them the thumbs up, the music that's playing there, I mean, it still gives me goosebumps when if it's on again. So that was it. You know, if the music would do that to me, I was into it. And it could be metal, it could be whatever.
Absolutely, dude.
But by the time I got into thrash, I guess it wouldn't give me goosebumps as much as it would make me want to do that. When I would watch Megadeth on stage and Dave on stage and everything, it just gave me like this monkey see, monkey do type of thing, you know?
Now, when was that specific? Sure, but when was that specific moment? Because if obviously from 5 to how far are we jumping after the soundtrack?
We're jumping to fucking going through puberty.
Okay, so
around fucking 6th, 7th, 8th grade, yeah.
Okay, so this is like several years after. So in between, what were you kind of doing in between 5 and 12? Was there any music, you know, kind of brewing?
Just getting more and more. Okay. Yeah, getting more and more into music, yeah. Expanding my knowledge on what music was. You know, by the time like I got into playing music and stuff, like up until that point, all my life, I didn't even know what a bass guitar was. You know what I mean? It was around that time where I'm watching and getting more and more into bands and stuff. So I started off listening to whatever was just popular, with like Korn, System of a Down, fucking Slipknot, all the bands that you would see on like fucking MTV. What was that shit?
Headbangers Ball?
They're really trendy stuff, you know. That's what
Mm-hmm.
I got into first, just because I had like no access to anything else. Then I would meet one dude who would be like, you know what, you got to listen to this, you know, and he would give me like Megadeth, fucking Killing Is My Business, or Rest in Peace. Holy fuck! So that blew me away. That was one, like you said, like hearing music for the first time all over again. What is this, you know? And like a lot of people's stories, the same thing. You start off with like the popular stuff, your Megadeth, Metallicas, and then the next level you have your, you know, from the big 4 to the big 8 to the big 16 to the big, you know what I mean, to really underground stuff, to, you know, to bands that are, you know, less or more underground than Hexen even by now, I guess.
It's true. It's actually true. So, dude, but I want to go back to one aspect that you mentioned, and that was the bass guitar, right? So when did you? What is your
Right.
first? What is your first actual instrument? Whether it be playing in a school band or playing the recorder, what was that specific instrument for you?
It's funny. It actually happened at the same time. So I'm getting into metal and really finding out what metal is. I listen to like jumping from System of a Down to Slipknot to Metallica, and all along I'm like, what is that one longer, thicker guitar with like less strings? You know what I mean? uh, and then it intrigued me, and just the whole fact that my entire life I'd like gone without knowing what this very common instrument is. Everyone knows what drums and guitar is, but it was around then that as soon as I found out what the bass guitar was, I was like, well, then what does it sound like? What am I hearing? Then there was this whole like mysterious aspect to it where, you know, the whole phenomenon of you can't hear the bass guitar in metal or whatever. Many times you feel the bass more than actually hear it bluntly straight on, like vocals or guitar or a solo. So that aspect of it kind of intrigued me, and that's what drew me towards it. Now, at that time, I had begged my parents to get me a guitar because I just was getting more and more into music and more into metal, and I wanted to play it. And I had a guitar at home, and then the Hexen thing started up, like meeting up with a couple other friends at school who also had guitars. Either they'd just like me gone into music recently and went and got themselves a guitar, or music was always around at home and their dad had a guitar and they like messed around with it as a kid and now they're really starting to get into it. That would be the two founding member guitarists of Hexen. That was kind of like their deal. One of them was kind of getting into music like me, and the other one kind of always had music on at home. And his first guitar that he played in Hexen was his dad's guitar. So I kind of trailed off there. Where were we? Sorry,
No, it's all good.
we were talking about
your first instrument. So was it
right.
it the
So
bass?
no, so
Mhm.
yeah. So I had a guitar at home, and then I'm at school in high school in ninth grade, and I saw that there's finally music classes that I can take. Awesome. So I take a music class, and at the beginning of music class, everyone chooses their instrument. And I told the teacher, I'm like, I'm really getting into this bass guitar thing. I want to get a bass guitar. Is there a bass guitar here? And she's like, no, this is more, you know, orchestral, symphonic. But if you want to learn bass clef, I can give you a bass clef instrument. So she's like, how about the trombone? So for a while, I was a tromboner.
Okay.
Sorry.
Good.
So that was, I kind of started getting into it. You know, I kind of was able to piece things together, you know, learning what I'm learning in music class with, you know, standard notation and the bass clef, and going home and learning tabs. And it wasn't exactly, it was two separate worlds, but, you know, I was trying to see what I can learn from it. I went and told the teacher, I'm not really feeling this trombone thing or tuba thing. I messed around with them. I'm like, she's like, how about drums? I mean, if you're a more rhythmic guy, rhythm section, how about I give you a pair of sticks? I was like, all right, cool. So for the rest of the music class, I just had a pair of Vic Firth sticks and a practice pad, and that didn't really exactly apply to bass. I was learning paradiddles and stuff like
Now,
that. But so
now,
that was it for music class.
sure. I want to go back to something real quick. You mentioned that you were learning, so you were learning tabs and learning how to read music and whatnot. And I'm just kind of curious if there was any correlation to bringing that into, say, and your paradiddles, if there's any correlation to bringing that in, to the bass guitar and kind of how that gave you like kind of the up on a new style for you, just with that specific instrument. How did you rely or apply those elements to the bass for you?
I mean, I'd say it kind of applied and it kind of didn't. I mean, music class was. I mean, this was just like I'm just going over what things happened in the beginnings, but not necessarily the things that influenced me the most. So, I mean, music class was cool, but basically, what really made me learn the instrument bass guitar was just playing bass guitar. And
Okay.
after I like learned a few simple bass lesson VHSs that you can rent from libraries, or how to learn bass, the really fundamental stuff. The books where you open in the beginning and it tells you, well, this is the E string and here's the A string, and a way you can remember that the notes of the open strings is eat at Denny's, get bad eggs or something is your EADGB or whatever the fuck. The really fundamental stuff. I started there. Then as soon as I picked that up and I knew what's what, I knew what the instrument was, I knew my way around the instrument, both in terms of music theory, what the chords and what the notes are, and in terms of hardware, actual maintaining and repairing and taking care of your instrument, the electronics or whatever. What actually taught me the most, and it's awkward to say this nowadays, it's so funny, was learning the Megadeth discography. What got me most stage ready and band ready as a bassist was fucking David Ellefson, man. Unfortunately, I gotta say, he's like my number one teacher when it comes to bass guitar. What got me most, seasoned as a bass guitarist was just learning Killing Is My Business on through Euthanasia. At one point in time, I think I knew every single Megadeth song on bass guitar and rhythm guitar. Not solos, just the riffs and the bass.
And
so that's what got me most.
Sure, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I love Dave Ellison. I will always support Dave Ellison in everything he fucking does. So,
Yeah, I know. Just recently, he kind of got
that's a whole other issue that it's like only as plagued our society for the worst, right? Now,
right, cancel culture and bullshit.
Exactly. So I support you, Dave, 120%. Anything that guy does, he's always welcome to promote it. So, fuck the haters. Anyway, now going back, that's right. Now going back to, so you're just learning bass guitar, right? You said you had some friends that were kind of like, jamming, learning their instruments, learning guitars and whatnot. I'm just kind of curious when it came on your radar that there was kind of a whole community of musicians that were happening around you. Was it a year into playing bass? Was it 2 months? Was it 4 years? I mean, so
from the time that I started learning bass to what?
Correct.
What's the time period for what again? What events?
So when was the specific moment where you were kind of seeing a community of more kind of metal musicians happening around you?
Oh, okay. Well, see, that right there was one mindfuck after another, because, of course, I'm sure a lot of people, I thought I was the only one into, I don't know, getting movie soundtracks or whatever the fuck. I thought I was the only, because growing up, in the public schools that I went to, metal wasn't all that popular and famous. As we know, in the 90s, it was rap and stuff was number one. So if you were a metalhead, you were kind of the odd one out in the schools I went to. I mean, fucking I commend you, whoever went to high schools where it was like the opposite, where like the majority were metalheads and there was like, the minority were people who were into rap or whatever. But the schools I went to was the opposite. So, you grow up thinking, you're the only one in your town who listens to metal. Then you like discover there's a whole other scene over here. And then there's a whole other scene over here. Then you peek your head up and you make your way down to Sunset Boulevard and you discover you are just one in a fucking sea of a movement right now of metal coming back. Because, when we first got into metal in like 98, 99, it was like pretty much, the lowest point of like thrash, like the lowest point of the old school 80s metal being gone. It started slowing down and by like, 94, 95. And yeah, by 96, 97, you had your fucking Limp Bizkits and all that on TV, and there wasn't a sign of any of the 80s bands. So listen, being into that during that time, I don't know, the parts of LA I grew up in, I guess. Mm-hmm. It was all just fucking rap and stuff. And so yeah, by the time Hexen was, playing the Sunset Strip was when I was very happy to see that no, it isn't just me,
So we're going way later. Okay, so that's very.
I'm sorry to jump around here.
No, but, you're good. I'm just trying to put the pieces together. So you noticed a community right when kind of Hexen started playing clubs instead of like happening.
Oh well, no, it was before that. When Hexen was just me and the two dudes I mentioned earlier, and we hadn't found our first drummer yet. Mm-hmm. It was around that time where it was like 2002, and metal hadn't been back yet, like it was in 2012, for example. Megadeth had just recently released The World Needs a Hero, which obviously was an awesome fucking, return back to their roots after Risk. But, it wasn't as thrashy as they'd get a little later on after that, once Dave realized that, oh no, there's a whole new revival thrash thing happening. And like it kind of died it was alive in the 80s and early 90s, kind of died, and now this younger generation is making it popular again. And it's us. It's people like me and you, dude. The legion of people around our age that made it like possible again for all those bands to come back. It's awesome.
Interesting. And so
the following was there for all the reunions and stuff to happen one after another,
Absolutely.
So, but at that time, around 01, 02, so we're looking for a drummer, and it's hard to find a drummer. Most drummers were either like into like Blink 182 and drumming like that, or there were these death metal guys that would like laugh at thrash and I started off listening to Slayer, but that's kid shit for me now. So they were like these crazy death metal guys, and but not really just like a thrash metal drummer that is just into Megadeth and Slayer and drumming like Dave Lombardo or whatever. So then we started looking on the Megadeth forums, and that's where we found our first drummer. That's where like I kind of saw that no, there's a whole fucking world out there of people into this music around our age, not just the old school cats or whatever.
Interesting. Now, so you're talking
the Megadeth forums.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like introduced me to that, connected me more to like everyone in our generation, and just trying to see like what bands were around back then in like 02, 03 that were playing like thrash metal and had our influences. There was only like a handful of bands. And, there was like Rattlehead, Desecrate, and like, 3-4 other bands. And we ended up playing our shows with them when we started playing Hexen Animated.
Now, I know this is the age-old question that sucks for us journalists to have to ask, but can you give me the origins of how you came across Hexen, the name itself, and kind of what it... And I'm going to ask you specifically, what does Hexen mean to you specifically? What does it represent to you?
Well, it was kind of like in the beginning, I just like picked the band name because I thought it sounded cool. And then later on, it kind of took on a new meaning where I was like, well, that's pretty fucking cool. I didn't think of that originally. But it is, as you know, Hexen is the name of a video game. And it is, I think, from the same studio or publisher as the Doom games. And I was big into video games. I was big into playing Doom 2 Hell on Earth. Named a song of ours after a chapter in Doom. So in that same vein, named Hexen after the game Hexen that I liked so much, but I also knew that it means witches or spellcaster in German and Germanic languages like German and Norwegian. And after that point, I was like, cool, you know, I'll adopt that as the reason behind the name of the band. You know, it's cool to, like, you know, I guess you think of us as spellcasters or whatever. Yeah, it's fucking cheesy as shit, dude. I didn't even think of this myself. I had someone tell me this, and I was like, I guess maybe that sounds cool. Maybe I'll say that from now on during interview questions. He's like, yeah, dude, Hexen, spellcasters, your music puts people under a spell or whatever the fuck. It hypnotizes them. I was like, all right, cool, why not?
That works.
So,
sure, go for it. And what does it mean to you now? Like, what does it represent to you specifically? Kind of.
I mean, you know, if you try to, you know, look at it in a serious light, you know, I think that would be a cool thing to have our music, you know, really like hit people at a deeper level, like at a subconscious level for whatever reason. Because it's funny, and I've had more than one person say this. Hexen isn't exactly party thrash. It isn't exactly music you just put on, like, you know, at like a fucking, at a party get together or whatever the fuck, like, you know, like those crossover bands or whatever that'll print their CDs as like a pizza or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Hexen kind of, it happens to be, at least to my experience, music that you just happen to find yourself listening to, like, alone on your own on like a fucking cloudy day and like kind of zoning out, and I don't know.
No,
especially the second album.
Sure, which we'll get into it.
Parts of the first album too have that kind of vibe.
Absolutely, and we'll definitely get into those. But I'm curious, for you, is that what music did for you specifically? When you would you listen to it on like a cloudy or rainy day to get you in like a better mood? So you kind of wanted to add to that specific element for people?
Yeah. Not necessarily maybe always shooting for a positive mood, but whatever gets people, like, you know, deep into thought, you know, feeling, what's the word for it? I guess contemplative or whatever.
Well, like on like a subconscious level, I would say that would help them, you know, just getting through a shitty day or whatever. But
right.
For me.
I don't want to like be the most serious band, like you know, we're super serious, take ourselves super seriously. Not really, but yeah. I mean, you figure you're writing music, it's got to move you, right? You figure,
absolutely,
write music that's deep enough to move you. If it moves you, maybe it moves other people.
Interesting. Okay, so let's go to you know, you form Hexen, you start playing kind of your first kind of shows. I'm just kind of curious, you mentioned some bands that you were playing with at this specific moment in time, but was it kind of hard for you guys specifically during the 2002 2003 era to get shows, because this thrash thing
yeah,
I mean, it was the new wave of thrash before social media was kind of brand spanking new, so social media has a lot to do with kind of how the scene kind of just blew up from there. But
it was so new that it wasn't the return of denim vest and high tops thrash yet. That hadn't even come into the picture yet. It was like just before, you know what I mean? Soon as thrash started picking up from there, you know, in came all of the retro 80s stuff too, you know, randomly you could find high top fucking Reeboks and shit again.
Interesting. I've never heard that before. So like, that's really interesting to me. So that's probably where with the correlation with it with the when the image kind of came into play was during the social media craze. And but was it hard? Was it tough for you guys specifically to get shows around this specific time?
Not well. We hadn't started yet. The 2002, 2003 days that I'm talking about, where we like just barely found our drummer, and we started like looking into finding who in the scene we can play with, and there were those couple bands. By the time we started playing shows, like we wrote enough songs and rehearsed them and like made a demo so we could have music to fucking show people, have CDs to pass out. We passed out our demos at local thrash shows before we even had our first show. We would go to these local thrash shows. In the beginning, there was this place up in my hood around the Sunland Tahunga area. There was this local Freemason fucking whatever that is. Like halls, like Freemason halls or whatever. Or you'll have like any one of those like whatever the fuck I forgot what they're called now. Like the Eagle Club, whatever the fuck, hall. And they'll happen to have a stage and they'll let the kids, come play for like a pay to play situation. So there were these bands around my hood. One of them was Dark Rain, and they were pretty thrashy. I wouldn't say they're just exactly 80s thrash metal. They're kind of some Pantera, but pretty thrashy. And then there was another band called Mad Dog, and they were kind of like an Opeth kind of situation, but more of the death metal Opeth, with growls and keyboards and all that kind of shit. And we became best buddies, like three of us, because the other bands that they were playing with the entire time weren't other thrash bands with influences like theirs. They were like punk bands and stuff like that. So we had those guys for shows around our hood, for local shows, and I'm talking local to the point of, you're playing at a fucking Freemason lodge on the stage that they had.
Right, like an Elks.
Then we made it down to Sunset. Exactly, that's what Elks Lodge. Yeah, that's what I could. Yeah. So, and then when we finally made it down to Sunset Strip and we were playing with Rattlehead and Desecrate at the Whiskey, the world famous Whiskey, that was pretty like, it's the Whiskey. It's the, the Jim Morrison, Doors, fucking Black Sabbath. Everyone's played on that stage. So that was really fucking cool. And it just grew from there. But it wasn't that hard for us because right at that time that we started playing shows and it started picking up more and more, there were these bands just one after another coming out of the woodwork, and by just a few short years later, by the time of like 2006, there was more than you can count just coming out of LA alone. And Absolutely. It was awesome. I mean, that was the height of our scene,
dude. And especially around, I mean, you guys didn't even have an album out during this specific time too, so
exactly.
This was like, I think
everyone was still on their demos and shit. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, we had one like self-released EP that was kind of album length out, but it was all everyone's baby stages.
Well, like where I'm going with this too is like, you kind of had municipal waste during like the mid 2000s doing their thing, and then it wasn't until, and at least in my perspective, Fuel by Fire, Spread the Fire came out that like literally the doors opened for this specific community and whatnot.
Right.
But I'm curious for you, let's go back a little bit before this time and kind of walk me through your first experience just going into a recording studio, because it's like you've learned your songs and whatnot. You've put in the hours. You found a studio. You probably had to pay, what, hourly, if I'm not mistaken. Did you rush to get in there and out, or was it more of like you knew somebody and you can spend all the time in the world to do this?
So our first initial studio experience wasn't a good one. I can say it's kind of funny. We're looking for a studio. We don't know where to look at all. Um, so I don't know how. I think it was one of the dudes in the band, the guitarist. I think he found a place and he's like, "This looks legit." I think Sonic Temple, $300 for a demo, 4 days or some shit like that. So we're like, "All right, cool." We call the guy up and we booked the time and we show up there. I'm sorry, it wasn't 4 days. I'm thinking of the later demos. This first one that we made was 1 day. It was 1 8-hour day for $300, one demo, and you try to shit out as many songs as you can. Now, if we were smart, we would have tried to like keep it to a lesser amount of songs and just had enough time to focus on those. Have like a good solid 2 or 3 song demo. But we tried to record 5 songs in 8 fucking hours, and of course that didn't happen. But let me track back for a second. So
Sure.
we show up to the place. It's like depot hell in like Downey, and one of the fucking roll up might have been a storage place for all I know. Places was this Sonic Temple Studios. We walk inside. Broken copier part stuff strewn about. It was like a copier repair place or something. There's all these like inks and toners and shit, and it was just a complete mess. Probably a side business, who knows, repairing fucking copy machines on the side. So all the way down at the end of the hall was where you'd record people. And at the end of the hall was like one room where you'd go in to record and the other room for the control room. So we tried to do what we could, and we ended up having to drop one song. What a surprise. And we came out of there with our first demo, and it was going to be the Blast Radius demo, except minus one song from what ended up actually being released. So we went home that initial first time, having paid $300, and we're sitting there in my guitarist's room, and we're fucking making all the copies, like as a band, all like hundreds of copies that we're gonna take to the, show, that Friday night or whatever to pass out. And I'm like, guys, we can't pass out this demo. We can't release this demo. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Blah blah blah. It's so nobody knows this. You're the first one hearing this. But the S Radius demo, the first demo that people heard, that is listed in our Encyclopedia Metallica or whatever as our first release in 2004, it was actually not the first time we tried recording that. So after I was like, guys, this sounds like fucking ass, and we rushed and fuck it, just cut our losses. It's $300 down the drain, but we're gonna regret releasing this. So we trashed that and we looked elsewhere, and I finally found a buddy, and it actually ended up being one of the death metal guys from my high school that I told you about. Like, couldn't find any drummers because they were all either fucking down for some Morbid Angel or nothing.
Right.
And fucking
He's all looking for it. Hey,
so
sure.
what ended up happening was I went to one of those guys that was my friend Andy, and I knew that he had a home studio. He had showed me his death metal band that he'd recorded and shit, and I'm like, hey man, our last fucking demo recording was a fail, dude. Is there anything we can do? And he's like, fuck yeah. And for like a cheap ass price too, we went there. We we could have all the time we wanted to perfect our takes or whatever. So we ended up being able to record the fifth song. The fifth song on that original demo, Sultan of Pain, was gonna end up being cut. It was cut. We didn't record it on that original shitty demo. So yeah, there is a original first Hexen recording that no one has ever heard and no one ever will. Well, maybe. For shits and giggles, we might release it. It isn't as bad as some of the stuff that's been released on like reissue extra type stuff, like the death fucking demos and stuff where they just literally put like a fucking boombox in the middle of the room and just press record, and it's noisy as hell. Definition of lo-fi. And fuck,
dude.
they,
But
you know, people are digging and
absolutely.
listening to it. Why not?
So, like, what did that first experience for you recording it wise? What did it teach you on the say the next version of Blast Radius?
Uh, Number one, maybe to perfectly know your shit when you're going into the studio. um, I mean, I was pretty practiced, but some of the solos and stuff weren't there, so it's a good thing we re-recorded that thing. So other than the obvious, just mainly patience, I guess, is the main thing. Because it's your life's work, and you're a passionate artist, and you're in there, and when whatever type of disagreements or you know conflict of vision or whatever happens, to compromise, keep your cool or whatever. Because man, did I have a heck of a time. And later, you know like, we're talking about this first studio experience having taught me things, but in reality things only got way more like fucking cutthroat. And later, when it was like the real time and we were under contract, we had just gotten signed, and we're trying to record State of Insurgency, and we're dealing with an industry standard of fucking emo screamo productions and clicky fucking typewriter drums and overproduced, cranked up the ass fucking, your final tracks come out looking like green bars, and there isn't any bit of dynamics in there. It was a fight. It was definitely, I'd say it was a heck of a fight.
I,
Later on, trying to get a natural sounding production. Um, Trying to fight off what the all the studios were used to doing, which was making shit sound like whose fucking productions can I say? I don't know, some of the
like an Andy Sneap kind of mix, or like a fucking
no, I mean Andy Sneap is pretty metal. I'm talking about like
oh, like anything that
what
came
was
out on.
what were like emo screamo productions during that time. I mean, I didn't listen to that, so I can't think of any bands off the
Well,
top of my head, but
see,
I'm talking like the trendy, overproduced stuff.
like
And we go in there and we're like, can we have real sounding drums? And they're like, yeah, yeah. Hey guys, hey, make it sound old school, right? Like they were making fun of us. Like we'd be telling the producers and engineers or whatever that we want, like like how shit was analog back in the day, pre Pro Tools. We didn't know how to word it, so we were just like, can you make this sound like old school production sounded? And they would just like poke fun at us and shit. Maybe because they didn't know how to do it, and whatever.
so
um
yeah, so you're talking more bands like I would say kind of like the Used, anything on Victory Records. That was all the stuff that I couldn't stand. Was that screamo kind of stuff. But dude, yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny that was kind of the yin to the yang for us, don't you think? Kind of like how hair metal was like that for thrash.
Dude, exactly. Yeah, fuck. Our hair metal that we like kind of were fucking against in our revival thrash scene and shit was the scene guys, with their hair like kind of like this and shit.
Yeah, I would like, yeah, the
And
peacock is what I
every
called
five
it.
seconds they gotta fucking re-whip their fucking scene hair and it comes out.
Yeah,
So,
dude,
yeah,
it's
that
and
was
then
our
do you remember they had like hair stuck up here and then it was like flat here. You remember that? I mean, that was
fucking
everywhere,
huge
dude.
fucking holes in their fucking in their earlobes.
I
Funny
want,
shit.
dude, and you know what's funny? I'm kind of curious for those people that have, what do they look like now? Because that thing must, they must have to have surgery to fucking fix that shit. Um,
Oh, yeah,
it was a
dude.
trend. That was a
Exactly.
total trend, dude. Um, but dude, I think all of us kind of saw that coming. Don't I can speak for myself on this. I specifically saw that scene as a trend, as like something that was like hugely popular at that time. And the substance for me, it didn't hold a lot. There wasn't, the songs weren't there for me.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, where is it now?
yeah,
Our
exactly.
our
Right.
thrash scene was a fucking
a a second iteration. It was a revival scene, and it lasted longer than the emo screamo stuff,
Well, dude, it's because of the substance. People we were writing actual songs and whatnot, and keeping it,
right?
kind of like how I would say grunge was a more simplistic way. It was all about the songs, especially and obviously the speed too, because we were fucking kids. Um,
Oh yeah,
now,
yeah. It had
now,
to be fast.
absolutely. And so, with this specific demo, were you handing this out to say other people in the scene, just getting your name out there so you can get more gigs and whatnot, or was it just a demo for you guys specifically, just to have?
Uh, it was a demo to get our name out. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So
I
you would
mean,
go to
I would,
shows and just pass
we
it out.
all would, we, yeah, anything and everything, obviously. We keep a stack in your car. As soon as you see some guy with like a fucking Megadeth, Pantera, Death sticker or whatever the fuck, put one in his fucking, uh, what is that shit called? Where people would usually solicit, fucking join our church or whatever the fuck. Give them a
Okay.
fucking metal CD. Um, Something they'll actually, listen to, But,
And what was the initial response specifically around this time for you guys in the 2004 2005 era? Just because you guys were more kind of technical players as opposed to say, some of the bands that you had mentioned earlier. You were kind of like what Coroner was to Exodus kind of thing.
kind of. I mean, we weren't necessarily tech thrash per se. Aside from the solos, I mean,
Right, but I'm saying you were more progressive and technical in the specific style of thrash metal. So I was just kind of curious
right.
if that kind of turned people off from listening to you guys, or did it kind of attract more listeners to Hexen?
Well, if you're talking in the sense of the material off of our second album compared to our first, which I'd say is more progressive and longer songs and whatnot, um, there definitely was a drop off. Uh, and yeah, that's a whole fucking other subject there. Yeah,
Right.
obviously the whole, the whole phenomenon of the sophomore slump, where if your second offering ends up not living up to the standards, set by the debut or whatever. But yeah, I guess people really liked our our first album. I don't know if it was strictly a just a Hexen at the right time, at the right place kind of thing, or it was a matter of simpler, more straightforward songs. Um, and all of that plays a role. I mean, like you've had your whole life to write your first album, and then now you have a standard to live up to and hopefully surpass, and you have to now do it in a matter of, well, however much bands have between their first and second album. Can't be more than 2 or 3 years.
Now,
Um,
okay, so let me change subjects on you real quick and just ask you about your vocal delivery and how you came to be the vocalist of Hexen, whether it be nobody wanted to do it, or was it just you were set on or you actually had an intention to be the vocalist and play bass for Hexen. So which one was it for you specifically?
Damn. you It's interesting. You ask another question that I feel like this is the first time in all the years of the band's experience that I've actually thought about it. Um, Definitely was kind of incarnated that way from the beginning. It wasn't like in the beginnings we formed Hexen and I was a bassist and we had two guitarists and we were looking for a singer and drummer and then ended up, not being able to find someone. I say, fuck it, I'll just sing. It wasn't like that. I kind of had the idea. You know what it was, man? I think, uh, I would just kind of, when I put the band together and I was imagining how it would be, and I kind of just presumed myself as taking over the vocals and bass role and the two guitarists on the side. I think I was going for the whole Slayer thing. So yeah, we're one of the vocalist or bassist vocalist. The bassist is a singer type bands, with the two guitarists on the side, I think I just kind of put the band together in the vein of or in Slayer's image, and assumed that I would just do the vocals and the bass. I was gonna be bass for sure, um, but just because I put the band together and the other two dudes didn't really seem like they were gonna step up and be straight up vocalists. They didn't really do all that much backup vocals. Even they kind of were like mic shy. Kind of had to like sometimes force them to do backup vocals, but out of necessity and out of just kind of imagining it that way. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay. And I'm
Probably I think guys just copying Slayer. I'm like, I'll put together a thrash band and we're gonna go the Slayer route.
absolutely. There's nothing wrong with either
Mm-hmm.
or, man. Now, when
Combination.
for you specifically, though, I got to ask. Now you have to be a front man. Now you have to put on the show when it comes to playing live and whatnot. I'm just kind of curious for you. When did you specifically kind of feel comfortable doing that? Because I know it wasn't the first couple shows. Most bands don't
Yeah,
have that. So,
yeah.
so when did you
So
start?
nervous in those first
When
shows.
yeah, when did you start to feel more comfortable as the focal point?
I mean, from the beginning, it was kind of just a set done deal that I was gonna be it, and the rest was just nerves to just get over. The guitarist was also a little stage shy, the drummer as well. We hadn't exactly really been on the stage before at any other point in life, for anything else. So it was the first, and that was it. This was the band setup. Hexen is this dude on drums, these two dudes on rhythm and lead, back vocals, bassist Vox, slash Vox, and the rest was just getting comfortable with it. The first show went okay. There weren't too many fuck ups. The only thing that sucked was this fucking hum. It sucked. There was this weird hum that kept coming out of one of the guitarist speakers. He didn't figure out till the very end that it was some pedal in the chain or whatever the fuck that he had to like silent or whatever the fuck. That sucked because during every one of the like silences there was like a silence kind of hum thing. Other than that, the first show went pretty fucking smooth.
So like
And
something wasn't grounded properly is kind of what I'm hearing. Like
I don't know what it was, man. But
so.
we just
Now
kind of went up there and just had to go for it.
absolutely. So okay, so it took you a little bit to get more comfortable just being a front man and kind of bringing people
Yeah, I mean,
into
if
the
you're
group.
asking me by what point in time was I like just not nervous anymore, like it was just like riding a bicycle or whatever, just another gig. I would say probably by 2006.
Okay. So
Um,
well before the state of insurgency record.
yeah,
Now with another
the
question I
state
have
of
is
insurgency record. It's funny. I mean, it's probably the case with a lot of bands, but it was our debut record. But it was kind of just like a greatest hits of all our demo stuff, like prime cuts of all the demo stuff. Let's actually put that out. So have all of this unreleased stuff in the demos that were our main songs that we played forever. So getting signed was all about like putting that stuff out there so we can now like start fresh and write something brand new. And the next album was going to be this huge epic thing, and
so,
that was the way I went.
but I want to go even back than that, and kind of
Okay.
ask when Carlos came into the picture, how did you specifically either find him or how did Carlos get brought into your specific world?
So around 2007, our previous drummer before Carlos uh, told me he was going to be stepping down, and he went off and did other things. Um, he was kind of over the band, and it was another shitty period. It was another shit. What's going to happen next? Is this it or not? But thankfully, it was totally the opposite from the end. Um, Carlos, I think Tack knew Carlos through some intermediary friends or something. Or its previous guitarist Tack brought him in.
Okay. Did you
and
know from school
I
or
didn't know who he
something?
was.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
they knew each other through some friends. But Carlos had gone to a completely separate high school and whatever from us. I hadn't heard his bands that he was in before that point. But yeah, he was in a band called In Misery, I think. And by the time it came down to Hexen needing a drummer, when word got to him, the way he explained it, he was like, "Holy shit!" I mean, everyone knew Hexen, and I was like, "Holy fuck, this is gonna be awesome!" And he was totally stoked to be in the band, and it was one of those things where the first time he showed up, we didn't need to audition another person,
In-
and yeah,
Interesting. So,
and the rest was history. But
what did Carlos bring in that was different just from besides his playing ability? Did he bring in other elements to the Hexen camp that maybe you hadn't experienced before with any other drummer?
um, yeah, he brought in fucking hard hitting, hitting the fucking drums hard. That's what he brought in, and that was fucking awesome. He could finally play the songs. He could add to the songs. He could, you know, play the songs tighter and stuff than the previous guy. But um, in the beginnings, there he obviously wasn't as good as he is now. I mean, we all grew like crazy from what was it, like mid 2007 when he joined. He'd
Hmm.
mostly like played punk and stuff up until that point. I don't think he'd played a single blast beat. I'm not sure, but at least not that often. But he was transitioning from like being in the crossover into getting into actual full on thrash, and then went from the Megadeth and Testament to the more like underground crazy satanic thrash bands and the onslaughts and infernal majesties um and we kind of grew together between 2007 and 2010. It was just this. I mean, the guitarist kept like getting into more and more technical stuff, more and more progressive stuff. By the time of 2010, when we were putting together the second album, they were totally like DT Dream Theater freaks. Like Ronnie was uh, playing a lot like trying to play a lot like John Petrucci, um, Shred, and yeah, those two. It was interesting. They were able to cover long Dream Theater songs as just a guitar and and drummer by themselves. They would go through an entire fucking 10-minute Dream Theater instrumental. It was cool.
And
So it went
sure.
from thrash to that. So it became like this interesting mix of progressive thrash, which isn't all that common, but
Well, where I was going to go with this too is Carlos also brings in, he brings in riffs and songs and stuff. He can bring in, obviously he brought in a couple tracks, I believe, for the specific debut record. I think when I talked to him, I think that's what he said, but I know he's a prolific songwriter nowadays. And I was just kind of curious if he,
he wrote a decent amount of the second album. The
got,
first album he had a couple. He didn't bring any like tracks completely on his own. Most of the second album was totally written. I mean, it was all the demo days songs that we wrote like before Carlos was in the band. It was all like consolidated into like this greatest hits of sorts or whatever was our debut. But there was some stuff that he added an embellishment here and there, so he got a credit for that. But yeah, it was mostly the second album that had
okay.
songs written like beginning to end by Carlos, that had embellishments by me. It was kind of like some songs it was the opposite proportion.
Sure. Now, walk me through how you guys came to get signed by Old School Metal Records. How did Patrick approach you and wanted to essentially sign the band?
We shit, was Marco involved for that? I mean, like every other band, I remember us sending press kits to 50 different places and getting denied. Um, but this was all back when before they thought that they could sign a thrash band. you know, until the scene got big enough for them to notice that, oh shit, there's something happening here. This isn't just some fad. Um, and of course, Warbringer got, got picked as like the face of LA thrash metal, as like, the number one pick. But before that point, um, I don't think thrash was really a bankable, signable thing per se. So we got our fair share of rejections until, sure enough, the label that signed us ended up being Old School Metal Records that signed us. Go figure, right? So I forgot how we exactly got in touch with that dude. It's kind of a one man band, one man project. That label. It's an indie label, obviously. I'm not sure if he was on the list and he happened to be the one that said yes, or it's possible that our mutual publicist, Marco, who does publishing for Hexen and Warbringer, and a bunch of other bands under M Theory Audio. But back then it was something else. It was Salem Rose. I'm not sure if it might have been he hooked us up, but sure enough, that dude, Patrick at OSM, liked us enough to sign us and give us the money to put that record out.
Awesome. So let's go to the State of Insurgency record if we can. And I just kind of want to know, recording it, I think you guys, and I'm going to let you tell the story here, but I believe you guys had like a time crunch where like you had to get the songs done ASAP, and there was like 13 tracks on this, but well, technically 11 because there's an intro and then there's an acoustic piece or whatever from I believe Carlos wrote himself or played on it or whatnot. But
okay, there you go. That's Sorry. To correct myself and to go back to an earlier thing you were saying. Yeah, the last track on State of Insurgency, the outro, was actually one of those like last minute things put together in the studio. Everything else was written and brought in, but that one thing, Carlos put together. And I made some embellishments for, I added a couple tracks for, and that one was a random, fresh, on the spot sort of thing. I totally thank you for correcting me on that.
Dude, I want you to tell the story though of like the time crunch for this record, because I want people to know kind of the backstory to State of Insurgency and why people hold it in such high regard. Is from the fact of my standpoint is dude, you guys were on like a time crunch, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Where like you had like a couple days to do it.
Yeah, I mean there was always a time crunch in the studios. As much time as we booked, it always seemed like obviously never enough time. But a time crunch per se, I don't recall exactly. Like in terms of like needing to record something in a month because we had this tour we were immediately going out on or whatever. I don't remember anything like that exactly.
Okay, because I'm gonna add to it real quick. Because Carlos told me that he literally had like a day to do the drums. He literally had a day or two to do the drum tracking for the State of Insurgency record, because I think you guys spent like 4 days in the studio for tracking guitars, vocals, and bass. And then he had like a day or two just to finish it off. So that's what I was just curious if that was correct or what. So
that he did have like a day or two, and I mean he knocked it out. I'm sure he wishes he had like way more days to have you'd have to ask him. I'm not sure, but in terms of a time crunch, I don't know. I mean, every time we were in the studio, like I said, it was like it didn't seem like enough time, and almost every single record we went back and bought like another 5 days for mixing at the end or whatever, for really tweaking and polishing shit, which kind of ended up being like kind of a backfire, less is more thing for the second album. People said it sounded overproduced. Now, in terms of the second album, maybe he had a time. I'm not sure. I mean, he might have just, felt like it was a time crunch. Like he had 13 or, ish, 12, whatever songs to do in like 2 days, and trying to, knock out 6 songs a day for a studio, contracted official record release in your debut. I mean, usually people take like a good week or so to do drums, maybe like five-ish days. And I'm sure he had 5-ish days, I think, on the second one. I'm not sure. So I think in that sense, yeah, there was like a time crunch for the first album in that he had like just the way we booked it, figuring 2 days should be enough for drums, and all of a sudden it ended up being like, oh shit. So he might have meant it in that way, but it wasn't like we had like some tour or something, to finish up the album in like 14 days and go out on or whatever.
Right.
Now the second album. Yeah, I don't know.
We'll get to the second
more
one.
time on the second album.
Yeah,
okay.
we'll get to the second one, but I want to concentrate just on the State of Insurgency era.
Right.
And from my recollection of interviewing Carlos, he told me literally. So you guys went into. We should backstory. You guys went into Love Juice Labs, right? Which was like a place that literally every band around the specific time that was recording in. I mean, that was a hot spot.
Yeah.
To
production. Ugh.
Right. So like.
It wasn't enough being on every like fucking screamo release around that time. Now every thrash band also had that production too, from Warbringer to Fueled by Fire to Hexen. It's funny.
To Tormentor.
We got out of the Love Juice sound. But yeah, sorry.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, bands like you and Tormentor and whatnot, everybody recorded there around this specific time.
Yeah.
And Carlos told me like he literally recorded it in like a day. Sweating his ass off. It was like the size of a fucking closet. So I mean, I mean,
I remember that. I mean, that it was like this little fucking square, and it was like totally. You know those rooms that are like so deadened in sound. They say like you can't spend more than like 5 minutes in there. Your heartbeat starts becoming like louder than fucking a bomb going off, a grenade going off next to you or whatever. It was kind of like that kind of situation. But yeah, it was a super deadened room. It was small as fuck, hot as fuck. There was no AC in there. So the guy had to survive off of like just fans and taking breaks in between, having to record 12 songs in 2 days. So in that sense, definitely was a fucking time crunch. Yeah. Definitely could have booked a couple more days for State of Insurgency. I remember, going in there and like he had like his fills and stuff like written out, his notes, new fills that he had like just added recently or whatever. Fourth bar or whatever, do this. So that was State of Insurgency.
Yeah, absolutely. And for you
specifically, I mean, he knocked it the fuck out. That's probably why I don't remember. It having been such an ordeal or whatever. But it was from what I saw, but he knocked it the fuck out,
absolutely. But let's concentrate on you specifically for this release, if you don't mind. And I'm kind of curious, just your playing abilities. I mean, this is your first record, essentially, and you picked obviously you mentioned the greatest hits from the Hexen catalog, right? And during the specific time, it's like. You wanted
fan favorites,
right? Whatever it was, but I'm saying like for you specifically, how did you prepare for this specific release? Maybe differently than all the demos before the EP. I mean, it teaches you everything until you get taught a lot of stuff until this specific record. And I'm just kind of curious how you prepared for it differently this time around.
For State of Insurgency. I mean, it was not that unlike getting ready to perform the songs live. I tried mostly to do a lot of my rehearsing, vocals wise, with the band. Sometimes I would, in all the rehearsals leading up to our booked studio time, I would, sometimes not play bass and just do the vocals only and really try to, come up with all the inflections and everything that I'm going to try to carry with me into the studio and knock out. Because you know how it is with fucking thrash punk vocals, man. There's not a whole lot of method to the madness. It's just kind of like mostly like adrenaline driven. You get out there and you just belt it out punk style, It's kind of how my vocal style was. So I haven't had a single vocal lesson in my life, and it sounds like it. and yeah, the rest was just, going over the songs at home over and over again. You know, whether just on bass alone or just on vocals alone at practice, so I can actually hear everything, have everything be loud enough to actually be able to sing at a volume where I could do some, you know, finalizing work with it. Kind of hard to do that, like, you know, in your fucking room in front of the computer, yelling at the top of your fucking lungs or whatever the fuck. Um, so, other than just practicing like it was any other show, and practicing the vocal, rehearsing the vocals at practices.
Okay. I mean, I couldn't tell if you got vocal lessons or not. I've never had vocal lessons either. It's just a thing of experience playing live all the time, and that's how you develop your own style.
Well, I mean, I don't sing melodically, so
I don't either, but I'm saying like you just learn to develop your own style just through experience, and I'm sure it's the same with you. It's just through trial and error. For you specifically, how did you guys end up getting in touch with Ed Repka for this specific cover on the State of Insurgency record?
Well, it was actually Merciless Death that like gave me the idea. At first, I think it was right around that time that we were in talks with our label that ended up signing us, Old School Metal Records. And when Merciless Death came out with their debut, Evil in the Night, and it had Ed Repka as the cover, I was like, holy shit, wait, this is possible? Like, the dude's around and he could fucking do covers for like bands of our level in this thrash scene or whatever the fuck. When I finally was able to see the guys again, I asked them about it, and I was like, dude, like, how did you guys end up pulling that off? And they were like, we just fucking had our label contact the dude, and that was it. And I'm like, okay, fucking awesome, wow. So I go and talk to our label about that, and that was like one of like the stipulations. The Ed Repka cover was like one of the main focuses, and I knew, like, even back then, that is going to be the cherry on top for the album. If we can get that dude's artwork on it, it's going to be a hell of a fucking, you know, some imagery. It'll be some iconic imagery. So I went and talked to our label guy, and he was like, Ed Repka, sure, I know a dude who can get me in touch with him. Let me send him an email and see. He came back with a price. Our label was like, that's reasonable. Let's do it. And the rest is history. It was fucking awesome.
Now, it
was all thanks to Merciless Death.
Gotcha. Now, did you give him a concept or lyrics from you guys, and he made the cover based upon that, or did?
Yeah, I mean, that cover is based on the even more cartoonish looking first demo cover of ours. So that whole first demo we were talking about, where the initial recording of it was trash, and then we did it again, and that's the one that came out and people heard. The cover for that I made in like Macromedia Flash before it was Adobe, and it was like the same scene. It was just like a suicide bombing scene in a metropolitan, and that's basically what we gave him to Repka eyes, and he did a hell of a job.
Absolutely, man. Now, obviously, the reaction to this, I mean, people still hold this record in high regards, but at the time when it came out, what was the reaction? I
mean, without tooting my own horn, pretty damn good. The reaction was as fucking as explosive as the fucking album cover was. I mean, people dug it. It was, like I said, I don't know if it just came out at the right time, at the right place. You know, it hit all the right fucking, you know, notes or whatever the fuck, and it tickled a lot of people's pickle. A lot of people tell me, you know, the album has a special place in their heart, more than the second one does. I mean, you know, you do this to hear stuff like that, you know. I'm honored as fuck.
Now, going off of the music video for this, you know, I want to know the concept in your mind of how you conceptualized the music video for the, I think you did it for Gas Chamber, if I'm not mistaken. My mind is blanking. And I apologize.
It was no, it's fine. It was for the pretty homemade too music video, but pretty DIY. It was for the title track for State Administration. Yeah.
It's been a long day, folks. Don't judge me too much.
It's okay. It's fucking more than a decade now.
But I'm just kind of curious. How did you conceptualize this? Did you sit and draw it out, or was it just like, I think this will work for the album and whatnot?
I think I put that together kind of like last minute. Around that time, well, years before that, actually, before Carlos got into the band, our previous drummer before Carlos had been going to school for film. He was studying like film and cinema. And I had actually helped him make a couple movies for his classes, like his midterm and like his final for that class, which was like to make an actual full-on like 10-minute movie or whatever. I learned a lot about how to, you know, film and stuff from that. And then, you know, Carlos got into the band and all that, and it was all just totally like our own idea. It wasn't like the label asked for us to somehow, you know, make a music video for them or whatever. We just kind of did it on our own. And I just remember from that earlier experience making like homemade, you know, movies for, you know, your university cinema class or whatever, kind of got me acquainted with how to like, you know, draw out scenes and imagery and whatever. So I kind of did like I made a little bit of a rough screenplay or whatever it's called for music videos. I forgot what the term is when you like draw out frame by frame.
Well, you do like thumbnails or whatever. You draw like maybe just, I don't know.
It's
like
called blocking. Regardless, sure. the visual screenplay of it, where, you know, at this point it'll be like on camera one, at this point, obviously for sure at this part of the song where it's like crazy like double bass, switch to the foot camera, you know, next to Carlos's feet, the solo have on, you know. So I made like a rough thing like that, and then we shot everything. All of the shots that are like of me, one of our friends did. And then all the rest of the shots that aren't of me, it was me on the camera, like, you know, filming Carlos from down here and up here. And, you know, we did like, you know, however many, 20 takes or whatever. Then I took that home, and then I put together like a rough music video of just us playing. At what point, at what second to cut to this camera, then to this camera, then okay, so it's the verse, cut to like the underneath Andre camera, whatever. Here's a backup vocal part, cut to this dude, you know. And then once I got a music video together that looked good enough with just us playing and nothing else, that's when I went and like scoured the internet trying to find all kinds of videos of like riots and, you know, all kinds of civil unrest and all kinds of shit that, you know, was a, you know, kind of happening over there and overseas kind of thing until 2020 America, when it fucking started happening, you know, right outside our fucking doors. But so yeah, then I basically went back in, got like the best of the best images or clips and bits that I can find of whatever the fuck so-and-so riot that happened in Brazil or France or whatever the fuck, civil unrest type imagery and scenes, and went back to the music video and went to every single like second or two that kind of seemed like there's nothing really cool looking going on. It's just kind of like people playing. I would put something, an imagery of something else there, or if it had something to do with the vocals, that would match. And okay, cool, here's like a cool little fucking, you know, looking section, I'll cut to this guy. Then when it's kind of back to nothing going on, it's just the band playing, I'll go back to the, you know, image of this or that. That's how I put together the music video. And the fucking label was, you know, totally down for it. I mean, it's one of those pluses that they hadn't asked for, but hey, why the hell not, you know?
So, okay, so I think the word you're kind of, I think the word you're kind of looking for is you put together a storyboard and had a bunch of, Yeah, that's essentially what it is. You put together a storyboard, and just built it around that. I like it. Now I'm curious for you. You know, what transpires after the State of Insurgency record?
Well, between State of Insurgency pre-production all the way up to our tour with Rattlehead, the only tour we ever went on in 2010, the national tour that I aptly named Thrashed and Detoured 2010, Cross National. Unfortunately, the name ended up being literal, and some dates that fell through. We showed up, needed the fucking gas money, and for whatever the fucking reason, we had to move on to the next city. But anyway, what happened between State and the second album was just nonstop playing, dude. It was the most crunch period of Hexen, to the point where you're playing so many shows, some months you don't even rehearse or have practice anymore, just because your practices you've become so good at this one set or whatever, you've like smoothed out every last rough edge or whatever, that you have shows every single like week, every Friday or Thursday, and we would just show up at the shows and knock them the fuck out. And then the rest of the time, if we were going to add a new song, change a cover, add a cover, then we'd obviously rehearse and practice. But it was just play, shows, get better and better and better. And we all just became the musicians that, we became during that time. Between State of Insurgency and the 1,000-odd shows we fucking played until the national tour came along. I'm exaggerating, obviously. But by the time of the tour, then you come back from tour, you're like studio ready. You've played so much,
Totally.
Then we rehearsed again for the second album. So it was mainly that. It was whatever chops, we got now, whatever professional chops and shit Carlos has now, I'm pretty sure happened during that chunk of time. Because he was pretty much, like I said, kind of a crossover punk drummer when he first joined Hexen. And Hexen was just about always taking things to the next level.
Let's move ahead real quick on the Being in Nothingness record. This is cool. I'm not kissing your ass. This is one of my favorite records to come out of the whole new wave thrash scene. This is a record I listen to literally all the time. So doesn't bother me one bit if you guys aren't fans of it. I love this record dearly because of the chances it took. The sound of it to me is way better. It's like more cohesive package. Because this is a lot to take in. This record for me is like I love it, but there's a lot of songs, and when I'm kind of going for just like a cohesive metal record, this is what I kind of go to is a record such as this. So, in your opinion, I know you stressed that it's not a favorite of your guys's, but can you walk me through just the whole concept to this record?
Dude, I first of all, I have to say thank you so much for your praises. You don't understand how much that means to me. Like, because that's not really a popular opinion, like I said before, and I'm sure you've heard, it's usually if people listen to Hexen, they like the first album. I haven't heard that kind of rap on the second album too much. So, I mean, that's music to my ears, man, because that's what we did it for. Making the second album, like going for the whole like big production, trying to make it epic thing. That was our goal. That was our aim. I dug it. People in the band dug it. It actually ended up being fans that were like, it's a little overproduced and less is more, and I like the vocals better on the first album. I like the songs or the hooks better on the first album, whatever. So yeah, like I said, man, it's music to my ears to be hearing that, because it's not a popular opinion.
Well, I'm not a popular guy, so it don't matter. but I'm saying, but for me, it's just like Warbringer's like fourth record that like nobody likes. I like those kind of records. I don't know why it's not. And it wasn't even, I don't listen to popular opinions just as I'm sure as yourself when it comes to music, but this just clicked with me.
It might just be because you're a musician, man.
Well, see
It
that
might.
too. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that probably plays a part in it, but I just think this is a more cohesive package. This is like, you want to
No,
listen to
it's
it all
only
the
one
way
for
through. This one, and it's not. It's I hate to say it, but like I can get through half of it, take a break, and then I come back to the rest of the half. It's not like
right.
I could sit
There's
through.
skippable tracks. There's some
Yeah,
sort of skippable tracks.
there's none for me on here. I really just think this is just a better. It's just a better release for me. But I'm just
Wow.
kind of
Okay.
curious for
I
you.
wish everyone thought so.
It does, it did, but that's why I'm sad that this is the last Hexen record so far, because I really think you guys were
we
on to
have to
something.
have we have to have art imitate life there a little bit. Went
Yeah,
from
yeah.
being nothingness.
But I really feel you guys as a band were onto something different during this time, because you've got to remember this came out in like 2012. There wasn't like a huge resurgence to this specific kind of metal, this progressive technical kind of style that you guys were doing around this time. So, I it sucks that this is the last one, and hopefully until now, I'm hoping we'll get more Hexen music, and which we'll get into if that's actually going to come into play here. But I mean, to me, this was a record that I just hasn't left my CD player still. I mean, I go back to it
Wow, really?
probably every 6 months. I'll go back to this record and just enjoy the shit out of it. So, was it a rougher recording experience this time around?
No, we finally, bought ourselves enough time to make sure that there is no rushing going on whatsoever for any instrument. So Carlos had the week that I mentioned to do his drums. And then when guitars came, took their time, another like week and a half there, like 4 days for bass when it used to be 4 hours for bass, a good another week for vocals. And then like after everything, a whole other like 2 weeks of mixing and mastering. So we definitely took our time to polish this album, which some people will say to a fault, but I definitely have to say myself that I'm probably going to be doing a little less polishing and editing and stuff next time around. I'd like to go back to a more in your face, dirtier, gainier production next time around. This was a cool. Unfortunately, I have to say it's a bit of an experiment. I don't think I'm really going to go for a Being in Nothingness Part 2 ever again. It might be kind of its own unique one-off thing. If anything, I'd like to return back to the 3-4 minute fucking mosh pit songs. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, during this time, the band really got into a Dream Theater kick, and there you go. Before you know it, we have 14-minute songs.
Well, I mean,
But
dude, I mean, this might be probably my favorite Hexen record then, because I just love the progressive. I love the progressiveness to this. I love I love that you guys took chances at a time when not a lot of bands did. It was more just straightforward, either death metal or thrash or whatever. But and this record is really hard to find. I don't know why that is. I don't know why it's hard to find. It shouldn't be, because it's a great record.
we were on a fucking Singaporean label.
So talk
And
to me about that. So why didn't Old School Metal Records put this record out?
well, I mean, we signed with Old School Metal Records for one album, and
Mm.
we delivered the one album. So we tried to venture out to see who would give us more than what Old School Metal Records would give us for a second go around. And we shopped around until this one label said they were down for it, and they were gonna, help us out with studio costs a bit more than Old School Metal was. Because we told them, like, this time around we need a month, because this is not a 2-3 power chord song album, and we need the time to do it right. Um, Finally, it was pulverized that bit. We went for it. I kind of had my reservations about going from a Bay Area label to something, outside the United States, even, and God knows where. Um,
It's understandable.
but, so hopefully that will be another thing that's corrected. When we have our reissues come out to make this stuff
Oh,
fully available for everyone. And that's the main
oh,
reason. I mean, you're touching upon the main reason why this whole reissues thing is happening.
oh, interesting. I
Two
didn't.
Hexen albums, mainly for availability.
Well, yeah, because they're not, dude. I literally found this one in a bargain bin for like $3, and then this one I had to buy at your show, and it was like all gone by the time, a couple of weeks after that. But yeah, I just it did the. I always felt metal records or records in general just need to be accessible. They need to be out there. If people want them, then people should have them. But
Hey, dude, finally, it's these. I can't wait.
well, we'll get into it.
These
I don't want to
these albums
spoil
are
it.
coming out on vinyl. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it too. I don't want to spoil it too soon. We'll get to where you guys are at now. I promise.
Okay.
But I'm just kind of curious for you the reaction. I mean, this record almost didn't come out, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Because there was kind of a lot of turmoil in the band. Because I specifically remember either Carlos telling me that he was surprised that this thing came out, and I'm just from your recollection, where was the band at during this time?
Well, unfortunately, the band kind of began its slow process of like disintegration around this time, because push came to shove, and it was time for us to either put up or shut up, and it just so ended up that Ronnie couldn't. Um, we, I mean, our name was out there. We had the following, and it was time to, start joining all the touring circuits and working our way up like Warbringer. And we had green light to do it. And our first entry into, the professional world was going to be a Death Angel tour. We got offered the Death Angel tour, and Ronnie was like, "Dude, I can't." He was in school. He was going to university, to USC at that time, doing a master's degree in international business, and he was like 150K, down the hole. And he went and put in a request for a leave of absence. And all that time, for that many years, we tried, like, having one foot in the industry, one foot out. He came back and said, this school is denying me. I can't take any more extended leave of absences. They're like, you're either going to be booted from the program and all your cash is going to, go to waste, or you got to stick through this till the end of the program. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back. We lost a touring agent because of that. He'd offered us the Death Angel tour, and how dare we come back with a sorry, you can't. It's like, you want this or not? Because there's a million bands that would kill for this, but all that. So that was definitely a strike on the band. And then sure enough, around that time, a couple months later, while we were literally still recording Being a Nothingness, Carlos texts us all and asks to meet at a restaurant because he's got something to talk to us about. And I showed up there, and I was, like, in shock. Like, we had the whole conversation, and everyone, like, Carlos goes home, and the other three of us are still sitting there, and I'm like, I still don't even know what fucking just hit me. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm like, we're recording right now. What do you mean he left the band? So yeah, I mean, all that time that we'd been playing with Carlos, and everyone had seen like what a good drummer he was and how effortless and everything. I mean, God knows how many people asked him to join their band. You know what I mean? And I know for a fact he came and told us that Warbringer had already asked him like 4 or 5 times on different occasions till he finally said yes. And the rest is history. And I definitely don't think there's any regrets over there on that, in that camp. Obviously, over here it was a little tough getting back on the horse. We tried there for a period of time, but it started becoming obvious that I guess we needed a break. We had been going nonstop, since you know ninth grade in those days, and we didn't even have a drummer. Day in, day out, Hexen and shows and blah blah blah. Needed a break. Tried to uh tried to go on there for a little while longer. When Carlos left, we still had like 3, 4 shows that we were booked to play, and that's when we got Geo and stuff in the band. And
So, so how did that whole thing come into play? How did Geo? How did he make the top of you guys' list or whatever? Were you guys just friends at this point? And
I think he was kind of like an obvious choice. As soon as Carlos left, and the other 3 of us were like, okay, now what do we do? And I think we asked around for a drummer. What the fuck else there is there to do? So we're like, shit, who is there in the scene? And at the time, we're like, oh fuck, Geo guy was playing for Merciless Death. Merciless Death's not doing anything right now. His other bands aren't really doing anything right now. Why don't we ask him and see where it goes? So we hit him up, and he said, yeah, sure, fuck it, let's do it. And we played the remainder of the shows that we had booked beforehand with Carlos. And then those shows, we finished those up, and then it started kind of like falling apart, you know what I mean? Like not having band practices as often. And then one dude leaves again, and now it was down to just me and Ronnie and Gio again. And then we weren't doing anything for a while. So then Gio was like, dude, the one stipulation I had for joining this band was I don't want to fall off. So he went back to, his other bands that he was doing. And the last final straw that broke the camel's back in terms of the band just, taking a break and me going into what ended up being an indefinite hiatus was Ronnie leaving.
Okay.
Right around that time, it was just, I guess everything had been on such an uptick, an upswing. And then during that period, post Carlos leaving, everything, I mean, if not just the vibes, and that's already everything by itself, was on a bit of a downswing until Ronnie was like, yeah, dude.
So
I'm starting to, I'm graduating school soon, and he went for the normal life. And by now he's married with kids and hasn't looked back. So more power to him.
Hey, understandable. Now I'm kind of curious what happened in between 2013 and now. How have you kept yourself busy during the specific times? I mean, I only can imagine it as a musician, not playing music would suck. So
at first I gave myself a break. I was like, let me not do music for a whole year and see, what happens if I just give myself that sort of a break and come back. So I did, and basically between like 2014, 2015, I was just chilling and not doing anything music-wise. And when I got back into the groove, it seemed to be a well-deserved break because I came back in and like immediately wrote like 2, 3 songs. So ever since then till now, it's been this whole kind of like our pre-drummer days, like pre-first show, pre-first demo, when it was all of this like slow, groundswell of putting Hexen together and building everything up and pre-production and all of that, writing songs and blah, blah. It's kind of been like that in life repeated again for these past couple of years. I needed to like have some songs to show people for a third album. So I wrote some stuff, and the rest has just been trying to find members, man.
So
you would not believe that in Los Angeles that it would be this difficult for me to find a fucking drummer and a guitarist that plays thrash metal. I mean, who'd have thunk it? But I mean, it's kind of music of our level, I guess, with all the fucking the double bassing and the crazy solos and all that kind of shit. Like if you're a proficient player enough to like cover Hexen songs to a T, you're probably already a good enough guitarist that you got your own band, or you're not gonna do shit for free, We're not in high school anymore to like, meet some guy and be like, hey, you want to become our friend and be best buddies and do this. I guess that was all, back when we were kids, working up to the big time of getting signed or not. It's not exactly the same game now. Probably why it's been all difficult for me, but that's all. It's all I need. I need to regroup, and I need to get a third album out before I die.
Now, why was this moment a specific moment for you? Why was this moment a specific moment for you to get the band back together? Why now?
Well, I've been trying to. I mean, I never. Oh well. You're right. The proper answer to that would be that Carlos hit me back up for this reissue thing. So we have him and our mutual publicist between Warbringer and Hexen to thank for that. They were the spark, and our publicist is the engine for this whole thing. So it just, I guess it hit a point enough where enough people fucking asked Carlos at Warbringer shows what the fuck's going on with Hexen. I guess that he came to me and said, these two albums are fucking, everyone's asking for them and they're not available. Can we just make them available? That's the main thing here is everything else will be a plus. The only reason this whole thing is just for people to be able to go out and get not only our two albums, State of Insurgency and Being in Nothingness, on CD as a dual 2 CD package where each album is going to have its own bonus disc filled to capacity with never before heard goodies. So the CD is not going to be the same old thing over again. You're not going to just have to pay for the same old package over again. It's going to come with all these extras. And it will finally be available on vinyl and cassette as well. So that, yeah, like I said, I'm waiting for that to actually be able to finally hold State of Insurgency as a legit, professionally printed vinyl LP in my hands. So you can see the artwork in full resolution and everything. Hear the album on your vinyl player, in your cassette player in your car if you're one of those old school types. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Best feeling in the world, dude.
Carlos and yeah, dude, and M Theory for making this possible.
Absolutely, man. Now, when it comes out, you better get your ass back on the show so we can help promote it and you can show it off and whatnot. Now, I'm kind of curious.
You can play some shows with Madras. Hopefully, it would be fucking amazing.
Well, that needs to happen just because we play a similar style of music, and we're some of the only bands doing that. You got to admit, there's not a lot of people doing a progressive speed metal kind of vibe to it,
Yeah. But you guys are fucking amazing, dude. I fucking love how brutal you guys are. I remember back in the day when I checked you guys out, I don't remember you being that brutal. And I remember I listened to your stuff recently. I was like, fuck, dude. This is death thrash. This is fucking brutal. That song Scorned, fucking...
Oh, that's fucking awesome, dude. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Ass, man.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that was a fun one. Yeah, dude, I think just like how with you guys, I think we progress in our own ways and whatnot. Just like, the first two Hexen records are vastly different in terms of progression and stylistically wise and production. And I mean, dude, you know how it's like. You just grow as musicians, right? And we're more pissed off at the more as time passes, at least for me.
Right.
So especially with the world we're living in nowadays, it's not a pretty sight right now. So you got to write some heavy fucking songs, some brutal tracks to get your mind off of it. So I appreciate the vote of kind words. And yes, absolutely, Hexen and Madras need to. I mean, the last time we played together was 2012, dude. That was literally the last time we played.
I noticed your albums were released in recent years. So when we were playing together, you guys were still demo days. You hadn't released an album yet?
That's not true. We only had our first record, which is the one behind me that literally just got reissued on vinyl. So now it's on vinyl.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's on
and
vinyl.
The new ones are way more brutal, right?
Yeah, the new ones are just in your face, just fucking gung-ho, straight to the throat. So, yeah, dude, I was a 19-year-old.
That's going to be my next spin for the next month for me.
Well, dude, I mean, you gotta think about it. Where me and you were at making the first records, we were like 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, dude. You know, we're now in our 30s, so we'll see what happens. But I mean, you know, we had innocence back then. Let's just put it that way. We had innocence back then, both of
Yeah.
us, right? So, with this in mind, you know, where are you at in terms of jumpstarting the band? I know you're looking for specific members and whatnot. So, give me all that information, and you know, the information on the reissues. When are these actually coming out?
Hopefully, and unfortunately, I have to say hopefully because back to the thing we were talking about, the times we're living in, this fucking COVID has affected everything. So obviously, it's of course affected manufacturing plants as well. Every single one of them had to shut down for a while, and now is backed up to the fucking tits with people's shit that they got to release. So I think they're like unable to give us an exact fucking release date or whatever. I'm not sure what's going on. I have to check back with like what's the latest news on that. But a tentative release date so far was August-ish, and I'm hoping we can stick to that. But for all I know, they'll come back with we're gonna have to do a month later or something. But as soon as obviously we get final word, it'll be out there.
Absolutely. Well, you better let me know this. And you know, lastly, I'm just kind of curious for the people that maybe want to jam with you and whatnot and want to be a part of Hexen. You know, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, if you shred and like to play thrash riffs and want to play for Hexen, hit me up. We need a guitarist and a drummer. We need a lead player and a drummer, and you can message the Hexen Instagram, which is Hexen underscore band underscore official, or fucking. I mean, should I put my email out there? Is that a smart thing to do? I mean,
yeah, dude, go for it, dude. If anybody wants to hit you up, I mean, you know, a lot of the people maybe aren't on social media, so I mean, where?
All right, well,
or do you have a
fucking
band
hit me up
camp?
on my Yahoo for fuck's sake. AndreHartoonian. That's Andre Hartoonian at yahoo.com.
Perfect.
And if you're a fucking drummer, dude, and you've heard of our stuff, you're into, our style. If you've heard Site of Insurgency, Being Nothingness, whatever. Unfortunately, we might be playing slightly more State of Insurgency songs than Being Nothingness, but yeah, you'll be joining a band that is trying to record a monster third album.
Absolutely. And, well, Andre, I really want to preference this and just, thank you so much again for coming on the show and hanging with me for a few hours and telling your story. I'd love to get you back on when the records actually come out so we can help promote it and get it out there a little bit more. Now, so obviously you can find Hexen on I'm hoping you guys have a Bandcamp. If not, you get, the Facebook, YouTube. Any last parting words before I let you go here, man? I just appreciate you coming on, man.
Just thank you for having me, dude. Appreciate everything, and I look forward to the day we share a stage together, brother.
Absolutely, my friend. Well, another episode of Popper's Corner. I'm out of here, guys. Cheers.